Well, hello, podcast listener. It's your old partner, JJ here. I just got off my horse to record this episode of JJ Meets World with our special guest, Al Jastram, who is a professional Santa Claus. You get to find out everything he does to prep and prepare to be the ultimate Santa Claus for people's wish fulfillment of meeting that jolly old man with the big white beard. Plus, Tucker and I talk about the ins and outs of convincing your children that there is still a Santa Claus in this technologically upgraded world of ours. So sit back, enjoy this episode. Spoiler alert, don't have your kids nearby, and really get into this episode of JJ Meets World. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Having a camera in your home for security purposes is more and more common all the time. From the Ring doorbell system to the Nest to, any of these Wi-Fi enabled cameras that stream to your phone so you can check out if your goods are being stolen from your porch or how your pets are doing. All of these things have really hurt the Santa, like the wonder of Santa, because now if you've got a kid who takes mom or dad's cell phone and checks the Nest cam, they'll see mom or dad putting it in there. So what does that mean for parents in today's era? It means you got to double down when you want your kid to feel the magic of Santa. You've got to hire someone to come in there. You've got to figure out a way to patch into that video feed and make it go blurry for that moment. In fact, if I am part of the Nest Corporation, I would probably, send some kind of an app out there, or like an add-on to the app where it says you can superimpose like a Santa Claus coming through, like he pops up into the frame and essentially like wipes it for a moment, and they're like, oh, and and you show the kids. Wouldn't that be amazing if you see a picture of your living room but then Santa like wipes it, or just like a white glove comes over?
So we actually tried a version of this when I was a kid.
Did you really?
I did. I was obsessed with Santa Claus, and I was also my favorite toy was our family's VHS camcorder. I would make stuff with it all the time. And one day I put 2 and 2 together. I'm like, Dad, we should set up the video camera tonight and have it run, and we'll catch Santa as he brings the toys. So we set the camera up, and then the next day I wake up, I run down, we put the tape in the VCR, we play, and sure enough, there's Santa. He comes on, his back is to the camera the whole time. And immediately I start asking questions like, how come Scamper, our dog, isn't barking at him? How come he's not angry? Oh, Santa knows all the pets of the land. Then they all know Santa. They know he's not someone to be afraid of. Oh, okay. How come Santa's using a plastic Hornbacher's grocery bag? Doesn't Santa use like a big sack? Well, Santa is thrifty, and so whenever he goes to any region, he's going to use some bags that he sees from around there. It's just easier, and he gets to recycle. Oh, okay, great. And that was basically it. Another thing I didn't think about, which I thought about 2 years later, and it was the moment where I left that belief behind, was I'm sitting in class thinking about it, and I finally realize, wait a minute, on that tape, I see us setting up the camera. I see us like we're recording and we're putting it on. And then it just immediately cuts to Santa coming in, as though someone stopped the recorder then and then started it right as Santa was there. Also, we just put that camera up on a tripod in the middle of the room.
Santa would have seen it.
Santa would have seen it. He wouldn't have been caught by that, right? I think it's the moral of the story is that the suspension of disbelief for a little kid, you don't have to go very far.
Right.
So maybe they don't need the app for the Nest Home. It's just all they just need is a shadow to go by, and they just go, "That's Santa," and the kid's gonna go, "Oh my God, that's Santa."
See, I think that like a shadow is way more difficult because if you have your whole house set up with these Nest cams,
but then Santa's magical. That's always the go-to.
See,
he's magic.
Is Santa magic?
Yeah.
Is Santa magic? What's his magic?
I mean, he's got the power of Christmas, which is he's kind of like the Christopher Reeve Superman in that you get to give him new powers all the time depending on the situation.
Just whatever it is.
Right.
Also, same thing with the Force, right?
Well, I mean,
like all of a sudden you can heal someone now with the Force.
Think about the Nightmare Before Christmas, and Santa seems to be a pretty powerful dude, yet he still gets kidnapped, right? But what happens the moment he's released? He touches his nose and he rockets off into the sky, so he doesn't even need reindeer to fly. So he's an ultra powerful dude who I think decides to hold back his powers when it becomes like a learning moment for people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Most of my favorite Santa folklore involves Santa being surrounded by magical things, but he himself is just an ordinary everyday guy. For example, The Year Without a Santa Claus is one of my ultimate, absolute favorite Rankin and Bass holiday films. And in it, he has a bad cold. Santa is taken down with a cold, so he's called off Christmas this year. And it was the year without a Santa Claus.
Got it.
So if simple like walking pneumonia can take out Santa Claus, I don't think that he's got the magic that everyone else thinks he does.
I think there's a multiverse of Santas.
Oh,
just like there is of Marvel superheroes.
Why haven't we tried to establish with kids nowadays that Santa Claus is like a job? It's like being like a postman, right? And so that's why there can be multiple Santas everywhere.
Right.
Is it's this organization that is, there's the head Santa,
right,
and he controls all the other Santas,
right,
and that's how the gifts get distributed. Because then all of those things, like how can one man get to everywhere in one night?
Right. I mean, they've already established the notion that he has helpers because that's the common go-to when a kid asks, "Is that the real Santa?" when they go see a Santa at some public event. So I'm sure today's guest has dealt with plenty of that in his career.
Our guest today is Al Jastram, who you undoubtedly have seen at some point or another doing his clown act. But during the holiday season, and as we find out, even outside the holiday season, he has been performing as Santa Claus for years. And this Santa goes to homes and does visits with your children. He incorporates magic. He's been with the Grand Forks Park District for decades and decades. You find out some very interesting stuff. I'm going to tell you right now that this episode, for sure, you shouldn't be listening to if you've got little kids nearby, because we break down the behind the scenes, that we pull back the curtain on the Santa Claus industry. But you also are probably going to want to keep a tissue nearby because there's some pretty emotional stories that Santa Claus has to tell in this. Al's a guy who I've known for a long, long time. I knew his daughter in high school, and I've had the pleasure of just kind of getting to know Al more and more. And he was a Linebender super fan. So yeah, it's really nice to get down and we have a talk like this, and you're going to find out how serious he takes the business of being Santa Claus. And thank God there are people out there who take seriously the business of being Santa Claus, because it makes the world a little more magical and it makes the world a little nicer. And if you've got a problem with Santa Claus, well, you can move to New Jersey where all the other depressed people are and just be done with it. So sit back and relax. Enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World with our special guest, Santa Al Jastram.
JJ Meets World.
Al Jastram, welcome to the JJ Meets World studios. You brought snickerdoodles, so you're welcome to come back anytime you want.
Those are courtesy of Mrs. And she was very excited that I was doing this, but she was also questioning why she wasn't invited.
She's probably pretty stoked because I put you in a play I'm directing right now, and so she's got evenings free.
Anything that'll get me out of the house.
Right.
Get him away from me.
Al, one of the main reasons we had you on here was I know that
I'm so good looking.
You're so good looking.
So we brought you on an audio only format.
I can't remember the last time I saw you without your big white beard and your frosty white hair. For years, you've been Santa Claus. You are Santa Claus.
I actually just completed my 34th season.
That is amazing. 34 years. So let's go back to 35 years ago.
Oh, okay.
How and why do you get into Santa Claus zing?
Well, like a lot, almost the majority of people who become Christmas performers, whether it's Santa or Mrs. Claus, I work for an organization that held an annual Christmas event for its employees, and I was the new kid. And it was one of those things where, hey, you're new here. You get to wear the suit. And they liked what I did, even though I had zero prep or knowledge at that time. We didn't have the internet, which is just a huge resource for storytelling, for Santas, just about any field. And so I kind of had to go with my gut instincts and what I'd read in, poems and stories over the years. And they liked what they saw. And they said, well, they came back the next year. We want you to do it again. And I says, well, I'll do it under one condition, that you get me a decent suit, not a ratty, rental suit. And two, at the end of the event, the suit I'll do this as long as I work here. But when I leave, or if I'm asked to leave, the suit goes with me. Yeah, we're good with that. Well, and they got a good deal out of it because I was there for 13 years. That's kind of how that all got started.
So I'm curious. You talk about like needing the stories and all these other elements. What went into your original Kris Kringle research?
Oh, there wasn't a lot again available. I read all the classic stories the night before Christmas. There are several other books that talk about Santa and in his beginnings and that as St. Nicholas. Just what I could find. There just wasn't much out there, which was really frustrating. I went for 10, 15 years before I actually found any good resources on being Santa. It just wasn't out there. And now you can't get on the internet. You can't turn around and see anything but if you're in the industry. There are all kinds of schools. There are hundreds of books on how to be, how to dress, how to have your business as a Santa. It's designed now so that anybody from the person who just wants to put on a suit for his relatives to the person whose goal is to be the best in the industry. And there's all kinds of resources out there now.
One of the things that I think is pretty unique about Santa is he's a character that is in the public domain. So it's not like no one can just show up and be Mickey Mouse at a party without the worry of being sued by Disney Corp. Even if you portray Lucky the Leprechaun from Lucky Charms, there's somebody who actually owns that. Whereas Santa Claus is something that nobody owns. Now, some of the refinements people can copyright and the pieces, I believe someone told me that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is actually technically a copyrighted material from whoever wrote the song for
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was actually created in the 30s by the Sears Roebuck Company.
Really?
No, I'm sorry. Correct me. The Montgomery Ward Company.
Oh, yeah, because those guys, it's people always confuse them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that was actually a Montgomery Ward creation back in the 30s to add to the storyline, and it gave them a marketing edge.
Sure. So, no mentors, no other Santa who took you under his beefy paw and
no,
said,
unfortunately,
young man, my time on this earth is as a snowflake.
I've only actually gotten to know Santas in the industry just in the last 10 years.
So are you mentoring any younger Santas now?
I have done some mentoring online, yes, in my limited expertise in that area. I certainly would be open to, somebody locally. I have tried organizing the local Santas into kind of a social learning group, and have contacted several, and some of them are great with getting together, having coffee or dinner sometime, that kind of thing. But I think as far as formal training, at least locally, my experience has been, we're good.
Yeah.
And myself, I've always been under the impression that if you stop learning, you're not doing any good anymore.
Did you ever go to one of those Santa schools?
I did, actually. A few years back, I went to, it was a specifics. It was just a weekend event. A gentleman from California who was an acting coach came to Minneapolis, and he specialized in Christmas performers. And I learned a lot that weekend. Other than that, the resources I've been able to take advantage of are books that have been printed, and like I mentioned earlier.
There's a documentary that I have not seen that came out maybe 10 years ago about a guy who gets laid off, and he decides what he's going to do is, to make kind of ends meet for the last part of the year, he'll become a Santa Claus.
Was it titled Becoming Santa?
I think it was.
I have that DVD at home.
And I never saw the documentary, but I heard it was
Very good.
It's wildly funny because it kind of pulls open the curtain on an industry that nobody really knows what takes place on the backside. Everybody has that Santa experience. Even the people who don't celebrate Christmas have a Santa experience.
Yes.
He's so much a part of our culture that, if you were an alien and you came to Earth during December, one of the first things you'd have to assume is, well, the leader of this planet is this man with a white beard because they're putting him on they're wrapping all of their goods in him. He appears at all these places where they have homages to him. He's leading every parade. Santa is the king of men.
Well, and to expand on that, not just in our country, but around the world, virtually every culture has a version of Santa. Not necessarily that looks like the Santa we're familiar with, because most people believe that he's been so over commercialized that he's no longer, in some cases, no longer applicable, I guess. They've become anti-Santa. But yeah, there is a gift giver in almost every country. And one of the ones that I'm really surprised at how few people know about is in Italy, the gift giver is a woman.
Really?
Boba Natale. The mythology behind her is that when the three wise men came looking for Jesus, they had gotten off track. And they asked her for directions. And even though she...
Wait, men were asking for directions?
Yeah, how about that? That's why they called them wise men. And she had... In the mythology, she lied and said she didn't know the direction where they needed to go. So as a self-imposed penance, from then on, she, like Santa, delivered gifts on the secular birth of Jesus.
Wow. That I mean, Père Noël, I know because I studied
In
French,
France,
and so
yeah.
we had some of that. Do you have a particular Santa mythology background that you like more than anything else?
Well, I don't
I know
know.
like the Russian one is like people love that one.
Dread Moroz, from the Soviet Union, otherwise known as Grandfather Frost.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very keen on the origins of Saint Nicholas, and from Nicholas was the mythology is he was born in Lycia, which is a small faction of Turkey, and that we now know, and he grew up. Became an orphan at a young age, and very wealthy parents, and was raised from then on by local monks. And there's a whole, there are books and books written on St. Nicholas and his beginnings as a gift giver. And there are one of the books that I read every year, and I have had it now for several years. It's called The Christmas Chronicles. Not the movie.
I was going to say, I love Kurt Russell.
Not the movie with Kurt Russell. This is written by Jeff Gwynne, and he takes somewhat fictional, somewhat fact storyline from the beginnings when he was a child, all the way up to the current, and the changes that have come in his life and how he's managed to get through not only his history, but world history and the conflicts and the discoveries and that type of thing through the years, meeting some people who are famous and some who are infamous, and how that affected what he does. And I mean, it's a huge book. It's like massive thick. But I start reading my books about mid-August, so that by November, I'm in that mind frame. So when I get called upon, I'm ready.
You know, it should be said that I wanted to interview you before Christmas, but by the every minute of your day is spoken for from when
this year, in each year I do an event in July, starting in July in Grand Forks. And this year I followed that up with some photo shoots in August. And then in September, my wife and I went to Bismarck, and I did a TV commercial for an event. And then from then on, it was more photo shoots. I've been doing more and more photo shoots each year early for people who want Christmas cards sent with their families, that kind of thing. And I've been very fortunate in discovering some extraordinary photographers that do some great work. And this year, the actual events where I'm doing appearances started with Pride of Dakota at the Shields Arena. And I've also been at the Bismarck event for Pride of Dakota. And not confirmed yet, but they're talking about having me at another event, which would be even earlier in November. So I'm pretty much running really hard from the mid-November through Christmas. Other than that, I'm pretty busy through the fall.
That is just amazing. But of course, Santa's in high demand.
Well, at that time of year, yeah.
And it's not like a Mickey Mouse costume where anybody can put on a head and become Mickey Mouse. You've got to look like Santa Claus. I mean, how many times does your beard get tugged on in a year?
Oh, in a year? Are we talking?
We'll talk a calendar year.
We'll talk just as Santa, or are we talking in general?
People are just tugging on your beard for fun?
Unfortunately, we have a grandson who is now, he'll be a year old next month. And at the age of 5 months, of course, very little at that age, their eyesight, and I'd see him every couple of weeks, is about it. He wasn't, when I would hold him, he wouldn't be quite sure who I was. And you could tell he had that look on his face like, what? And And then his hands would start going, and he eventually would get to the beard, and he'd pull on it, and he'd get this smile. Okay, I know this guy. And ever since then, it's been one of those that the first thing he's got to do when I hold him or pick him up is he's got to reach out and grab it.
Touch Grandpa's beard. Huh?
That's right.
Oh, that's neat. Okay, so if I am listening to this podcast, I've got a million questions. So let's try and get some of these like laid out. Number one, the costume.
Yes.
So the suit itself. Tell me about the evolution. So you started out as Santa. This company invested in a really nice suit for you, and 13 years later, you took that same suit. Is that the same one you're using now?
Oh no, I've retired that many years ago.
Was that the traditional red with the fur lined and gold buttons?
Yeah, there's actually two very popular styles of those suits. The traditional, which you just said, it has the white collar, white fur down the front and white around the bottom. And then it's all bright red with white trim. There's the Coca-Cola style suit, which was created by Sonny Sundblom, a Norwegian artist who worked for Coca-Cola Company. And the difference is there's no white fur trim down the front of the coat, and what is there instead is gold buttons with the reindeer on them. I have both of those versions with an added twist. Instead of just pants being held up by suspenders, I wear a matching jumper, some people call it, or bib overalls. I find the bibs to be incredibly comfortable. And number two, lots of pockets to carry things in, and it gives me a unique look. There isn't anybody else that I'm aware of in the region that has this that style of suit.
And it really fits for Santa Claus because you imagine Santa Claus is there helping make the toys.
The workshop. Yeah.
And, we're talking about carpenters. We're talking about very small little elfish carpenters.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that he'd be wearing bib overalls.
Yeah. And it's like everything, it's evolved over the years. My first traditional suit with the bib overalls was manufactured for me by a young lady down in Maple Lake, Minnesota. She goes by the name of Priscilla Mooseberger. And her real name is Tricia. She is a former Ringling seamstress.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was also a Ringling performer as a clown. And I met her many years ago, and she made my first custom Santa suit. She's also made suits for myself and my partner for performing as clowns.
Oh, I had the pleasure of being in the Santaland Diaries at Theater B, one-man show about a guy.
Yes, I'm sorry I missed that.
Well, it was during your busy season.
Just a bit, yeah.
But when I spoke with the costumer about what this suit was going to look like, the first thing I said was, I'm worried about how hot it's going to be, because I was wearing an elf costume, and my elf costume consisted of a one-piece, like, shoulder to toe, like unitard that was candy cane striped. Yeah. And then I had big puffy green pants with overalls that kind of looked a little bit like lederhosen, and then a hat, the long hat that matched my jumpsuit, right? And then I had shoes that had, bells and big twirls on them.
You went full stereotype.
Because it was supposed to be working at Macy's in the Santa photo department, so I think like that is what the interpretation was. And
the point of the show is that the elf costume has to look and feel degrading. On some level. Like you have to, it's not like Santa who gets to be regal and beloved. Like the elves don't have the same level of appreciation, and the whole notion of the story is to lean into that, the notion of like the crappy holiday job for a lot of people. So, and because JJ's got these amazing legs underneath his body that our costumer made sure to accentuate them as like candy canes in the costume. I will say though, my favorite moment in the show was when we had you put on the Father Christmas costume,
right?
Which we called it the Father Christmas costume. It was a red Santa robe, but it was nice and long and beautifully crafted by our costumer.
And not just red fabric. It was, it had kind of a
Yeah.
pattern design to it. And it was what I kind of associate with those more traditional, like the
Father Christmas.
rural Santa Claus, I
Okay.
guess. Yeah, Father Christmas, who this was what he would wear as he traveled through the night. So the front kind of comes down, but then it's got a train almost at the back of it.
Sure.
And I mean, it was a beautiful piece that was put together.
Throughout the show, he's constantly talking about all these different Santas that work at this particular photo booth. So they all have different personalities, and every time JJ's character would be talking about one of them, he'd have a different type of Santa hat from a bag that he'd put on. So then when this Santa comes in, it's left mysterious, but the notion of the story is that this Santa at the end could be the real Santa.
Yeah.
Right? He never meets him before or after, and he has this particular effect on the families that come through. So we wanted to go, this wasn't like just
this wasn't the guy who was counting the money he was making, and does he have enough to go
Right.
buy a bottle of whiskey?
This was someone who clearly cared about playing Santa, which is the effect we were going for.
And there are some incredible Santa portrayers out there. It's unbelievable, some of them, the way they do.
when you see a great Santa, is it hard to be just a fan? Or, like, are you sitting there being like, oh, look, he's doing this. This is amazing. I've never seen something like this. Or when you see the Santa who has spent the last year learning sign language so that they can incorporate sign language into pieces of it. Is it hard to be just a Santa fan?
No.
That's awesome.
No, and that's why one of the reasons why I continue to be is that I am a fan of the character as well as the people who perform it really well.
So what about heat in your costume? Because I've seen this thing, and it looks like what you would wear if you were flying through the night on a sleigh and you needed to keep warm.
I'm very fortunate, like I said before, I've had two different costumers make two different costumes for me. And if I were to be indoors and be like a typical mall Santa and wear the coat all of the time, yes, it would be incredibly hot. And there are ways to counteract that. There are cool suits that you can wear underneath, that type of thing. I'm very fortunate in the fact that I very rarely have to do that. When I'm at Santa Village in Grand Forks, when I'm at Pride of Dakota, or just about any of the events that I appear at locally, I will enter usually wearing the coat, and the hat, and the gloves. And then I usually request, I'll ask the group, is it okay if I take my coat off and stay a while? Oh, yeah. And so the belt, 4-inch leather belt, which is really heavy, and the belt buckle could bring in satellites. and then the coat, and I hang them up, and then I'm in the usually a nice knit shirt that's a Santa-like, and then my bibs, and it makes it much more comfortable for me. And being I'm more comfortable, it makes it easier for me to not worry about something other than why I'm there. Mm-hmm. Because that can be really distracting.
Well, I can imagine as so. And, the last thing you want is Santa with flop sweat.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I've seen it happen.
Do you launder it at home? Do you have it dry
Yes.
cleaned?
I'm very fortunate again. The suits that I have are machine washable. Yes. I can avoid the horror stories of taking my suit to the dry cleaner and getting back and the fur is all pink.
Ooh, yeah.
I have heard and read so many stories of that nature, and that's probably the number one reason why I would not want to own a suit that had to be dry cleaned, because a good suit is not inexpensive. It's the most expensive bit of clothing that I have. And I don't have the more expensive suits. Some of the gentlemen I know buy their suits exclusively from a place in California, And this woman does incredibly good work. I have no fault against it, but they all have to be dry clean. The prices start in the $2,000 range for a two-piece suit and go up to about $5,000. And to take that to a dry cleaner's and have them present it to you, and here it is, and the fur's all pink instead of white, would just be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And especially if you go, I need that suit for today.
Right. Exactly. Right. That doesn't happen in mid-April when it's not being called upon.
It would just disturbing on a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk facial hair now. So one of the I think biggest tropes of being Santa is having someone tug on your beard to find out if it's real or not. Mm-hmm. And because that's to me how you can tell you've got a Santa who's kind of phoning it in if they don't have the beard.
Right.
Now, what I would specifically like to hit on is beard length, because I see Santas with differing beard lengths. Do you purposefully choose where it is? So yours is probably, midway between your chest and the base of your neck.
And it's short now.
And it's short. So you actually let it go longer during the Santa times. I
will, at the beginning of July, before the summer event that I'm usually at, I will get it bleached, completely cleaned up, trimmed, and styled, both my hair and my beard. And then I won't cut either again until I do another event, usually October, November, and then it's just a light trim, and I won't get a serious cut until after Christmas.
What does it take when Santa goes in and gets a bleaching?
Well, what do you mean? What does it take?
Well, I mean, like, where are you going? Like, how do you find a good, like, bleacher who gets to bleach? Oh. Like, everything you're doing is someone gets to bleach Santa's hair, right?
Right.
Someone gets to dry clean Santa's clothes. Somebody gets to change the oil in Santa's non-sleigh mode of transportation.
Well, that's the great thing is that Santa all over the world has rental agencies set up where they supply him, of course, with transportation when the reindeer and the sleigh can't otherwise go.
Right.
So, that's a great thing. Now, as far as my hair and my beard is concerned, I trust it to one young lady. Her name is April Knudsen, and she's been mastering my look for many years now. And if she hears this, I hope she's doing better. She's had a bout with some issues lately, and I hope that that all works out for her. But I love her work, and she's done really well by me. I would, if most women would identify with this, is it's like going in and getting your hair colored.
Yeah.
It's not inexpensive. It's an investment.
How long does it take?
Well, it's gotten better over the years. The first year that we did this, we went for 4.5 hours. What? Sitting in the chair. It was kind of a trial and error thing. Well, we'll see how much, we put some bleach in and some toner and rinse it out. We got to go more. And we've kind of gotten it down so that she knows pretty much what to do and how to do it. So now, the last time I was there, I think it was about 2 hours.
What about your eyebrows? You get your eyebrows done?
North Dakota law says that beauticians cannot bleach eyebrows.
What? Is that real?
That's real.
Why don't you go over to Minnesota sometimes? You can pack up April, head over to Minnesota. You can go right on the Veterans Bridge.
Well, if you've seen me at Christmas time, you know I've taken care of that problem.
Interesting. Do you wear makeup of any kind? Do you rosy up the cheeks?
Shoots, yes. For photo shoots, I'll put some red around the nose and on the cheeks to give it that little extra sparkle. And you get closer to Christmas when the bleach is starting to come through, and I'll have to do some touch up, but that's about it.
In a world where we're becoming more open and certainly more focused on health, do you think children worry that Santa's going to get diabetes or has diabetes?
Not in my experience.
Really?
I've heard tell stories. Matter of fact, there was a young man, and I believe he was in Calgary. The internet ladies dubbed him as the fit Santa.
Oh.
He wore a blazer and slacks and a shirt and tie, and he had a salt and pepper beard and wore a Santa hat. The two-piece suit was red with white trim. And I don't know a whole lot more than what I just said, because there was just pictures circulated on the internet. I don't know if he was actually portraying himself as Santa in some places or that. And there is actually an internet group that promotes Fit Santa. They promote, of course, exercise and that kind of thing, and getting yourself through the season. And it is, we have a fairly high mortality rate as a industry.
I can imagine. I mean, everyone thinks of Santa as roly-poly. He laughs like a, belly shakes like a bowl full of jelly.
The last survey I read, the average age of the Santa is 59 to 73. Okay, so we're already starting high numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the weights average right around 275.
Holy smokes. That's 5 pounds more, or I only weigh 5 pounds more than that. And that's the average Santa weight?
Yeah. And
Oofta.
One of the concerns, of course, for reasons of not wanting to disappoint, is to maintain health through the season. So you'll hear a lot of recommendations, and myself included, following eating healthy, taking plenty of vitamin C or whatever else you want to stay healthy and not get ill. Because let's face it, you're face to face with hundreds and thousands of children who, for lack of a better word, have got colds or the flu, and parents are going, we're getting this photograph today.
I mean, yeah, you're constantly interacting with germ factories.
Yep.
And they're coming from school where they've been exposed to all these other germs at school. And there's, I see quite a few photos of kids crying when they meet Santa. I feel like that is a very regular thing. The whether they're tears of joy or, I see some kids who are maybe a little intimidated by Santa Claus, and in that case, you've got tears running, you got a snotty nose. So yeah, keeping yourself fit, it must
healthy,
be
yeah.
really difficult. And I don't think that people accept the fact that I'm sorry, Santa's sick, Santa can't come out. The last thing you want to hear is Santa's not well.
Let's take the stereotype of meeting Santa Claus. The most part is people do this in a mall setting where they're in line from anywhere from 30 minutes to a couple hours. And they've been standing there for a while, and they're uncomfortable for standing there. And the children are getting antsy, and they want to get through this. And by the time they get to Santa, the children have so much pent-up energy that they just, they want to go. They don't want to sit. And suddenly they're also faced with a stranger, somebody they probably never met before, that they had these childhood ideas of what's going to happen, and they're suddenly faced with the reality, and it shakes them. It scares them in most cases. And the parents have been waiting there for a while, and they're at the point where I don't care. I just want a photo.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. I understand. It's a frustrating experience, which is number one reason why I've never been a mall Santa, ever. I've never done the mall experience. The average child in a mall visit gets, 2.5 minutes? that may be exaggerating, long, which I wanted to be completely opposite of that. I wanted it to be a relaxed situation where the children were comfortable, the family in general were comfortable, and it could be a really great experience, as best as I could provide. So I started off by specializing in home visits, and that today is still my favorite. I go to a family's home. I'm there from anywhere from a half an hour to an hour, depending on the situation. I share some of the stories that I've written. Some of those stories I've incorporated magic, which makes the visit all of the more powerful. And the children get to spend as much time as they want and or need or don't need. They're not forced into a situation. They're in their home, they're comfortable, they have their toys, they have their family around them. And it makes for A, better visit, B, incredibly wonderful memories. Not just for them, but for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I have relationships with some families that I am now visiting the children of the children I visited when they were young. I have parents that have come up to me and showed me pictures, and they say, I have pictures just like this since she was an infant, and she's now 17 years old. That's incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just find that mind-boggling to be able to be part of someone's life for as long as that lasts. And,
wow.
In the days before cell phone cameras and the internet, people took photos with cameras and saved them in books. And we tried to kind of a fantasy more than anything is, how many photo albums are we actually in? And we know these people will never know us, who we really are, and we'll probably never meet on the outside of that situation. But how many of them are going, yeah, and this Santa came to our house and he did, wow, it was incredible. And these children have these memories so that they can pass on to their children. And I think that is just such a great thing. Whether or not they know who I am or not doesn't matter. The fact that they've got those memories that they will cherish.
We were speaking about this a few days ago, but could you tell me a little bit about like the Santa hospital experience? Because my heart was breaking when you were telling this story, but at the same time, I also realized how powerful it is.
I have been a family entertainer for longer than I care to remember, and have been asked from time to time, well, do you go to hospitals and visit children, and why don't you? And I'll be the first to admit that I would be a basket case before I even got started. Nobody wants to see a Santa cry. Nobody wants to see a Santa in tears over a child close to dying. And I'm a chicken, let's face it. But I had a recent experience. I entertain for a school in Grand Forks that specializes in helping children with developmental challenges. And this one particular young man he's an only child, and he's got some challenges. But a few years ago, he also was diagnosed with leukemia, which in itself is a sad situation. And I met him a couple of times at the event in Grand Forks, and we became really good friends. He is not very verbal. He has difficulty speaking, but he can make himself, with effort, he makes himself known what it is he wants or needs. And when we're together, he will not move away. He sticks right by Santa the whole time he's there, no matter what else is going on, which I think is incredible. The fact that he is fighting this leukemia, this terrible thing, and he's doing as well and as happy as a little guy as he is. His dad recently told me that he was in the hospital with pneumonia. And they were all very concerned, which is understandable. And I asked him, I said, would it be appropriate if, this is the end of January, would it be appropriate if Santa made a visit to the hospital? Thinking that they were in Grand Forks. And he goes, well, you would drive all the way down from Grand Forks? I said, well, no, I live here in the Fargo-Moorhead area. He goes, well, we're at Sanford, so that'd be great. I said, okay. You tell me when, and I'll be there. And I went up there it was a Saturday morning. And of course, the nurses were all really, Santa? What are you doing here? And several of them had to have pictures before I left, which is great. It's what I do. You mentioned Mickey Mouse earlier. Just a side note. The only character in the world that has his picture taken more often than Santa.
Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse.
Interesting.
That's a fact. Anyway, they went and we had just a great visit. I brought him some special things from Santa and Mrs. Claus, and we talked, and Dad recorded it. And I was very touched by how, despite all these challenges, how happy the little guy was. His name is Tommy, and I just loved the guy to pieces. I did the visit, and I said my goodbyes, and he's since at home again and doing much better. Thank the Lord. Pray for his health all the time. But I know Santas that have gone through the hospital visits, and the most terrible thing of all, have had children pass in their arms. And I don't think I could survive that. I don't know if I could ever do it again after a situation like that. But it's something that is very real in our world. Children pass away for the wrong reasons.
Are you inspired by the fact that there are children today who are using things like a Make-A-Wish experience to live life as Santa Claus for a little bit? I think about that young man here in Fargo whose dream was to deliver toys to the Sanford Children's Hospital, and how the community was like, yep, we got a horse-drawn sleigh. Yep, we've got thousands of dollars worth of toys. Yep, we're going to find some Santa caps. Yep, we're going to line the streets and cheer on Santa as he goes up there. It's got to be amazing working with children, and not that children are the only ones who appreciate Santa either. You must also have tons of adults who love seeing Santa every year. But those children who, I almost wish I could go back in time and have that thing where I believe in something so much, and how there's somebody who's a stranger who has complete love and compassion and caring for me. I think it's beautiful, and I think that it's a shame when you lose that magic, but then you become part of the next part of the story, which is, if I know the truth, I'm not going to ruin
for someone
else. So what's it like being in that situation? And maybe could you touch on when you meet one of the cynical children out there?
Oh, let's start with that first. I had the distinct pleasure of going to a family's house, and they were doing a neighborhood Christmas party. So they invited several of the families and their children. At this house, there were 19 children, ages 3 to 19, and 20-some adults. When I enter, I'm greeted very nicely by everybody, and I'm directed to a chair in the living room in front of the Christmas tree. Perfect setting for photos. About 4 feet away from me, about the distance from us, between each other, the children are all sitting on an extended sofa. And this young lady, I want to say about 10 years old, sits down square off in front of me. Before anything else can start, before everybody's finished saying their hellos, I hear, "You're not the real Santa." And of course you hear these kind of giggles and you see the smiles like, aha, we're going to get this guy. And I just sat down and just very matter-of-factly says, okay, we'll see. And I started telling one of my stories about how the origins of the Christmas tree came around, and it's partly based in fact and partly in fiction. And I get around to how trees have been decorated through the years and talk about garland and other ornaments and that type of thing. And nowadays, most children don't have that experience of putting together popcorn garland for their Christmas tree. That's just not done. And as growing up as a child, that was one of the great experiences I had with my grandma, was popcorn and cranberries strung together on the Christmas tree. I have pictures of our daughter eating the popcorn off the Christmas tree at my mother's house. It's just... So I get to the garland part, and these children are all looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I asked the question, I says, have any of you ever made a garland for the Christmas tree? No, is their answer. Is, okay, we're going to make one right now. So I take out some tissue paper from my pocket, some white, some green, some red, and I hand it out to several of them. And I hold on to a white one, and I hold it up, and I says, this is what I want you to do. Exactly the same thing that I'm about to do. This is very easy. First, grab it in the middle and tear it in half. Oh, this is fun. This is great. It's okay. Put those together and tear them in half again. Okay. Once more, tear them in half again. So each of these children, there's about 9 of them that are doing this, each have this handful of basically confetti, tissue confetti, white, red, green. I says, now, each of you, please place your paper into my hand. And they do that. And of course, their curiosity level is like way up at the ceiling right now. What is going to happen? And I smash the papers together and make like a snowball almost type of thing. And then I ask them with their hearts and their mouths to say, Merry Christmas very quietly, almost a whisper. Such Merry Christmas. And they do that. And then I take a piece of the white tissue paper and I start pulling it up on my hand. And it gets about a foot up, and all of a sudden it turns red. And then another, now by now, there's a constant string of tissue paper. It's white, red, and green. And it's about 3 feet long. And these children all threw up their hands, including the 10-year-old, because he is real. And the mother caught the picture at the right exact moment and sent it to me. And it's just one of those great experiences where you get to have a child believe for maybe just one more year, but it really works. And there's some people that you'll never convince, and that's not my job. My job is just to make memories while I'm there. And as I said earlier, I have some adults that have come to me that their children are now coming to me, and they have that. They know. I mean, they're realistic. They know that the real Santa Claus is not sitting in front of them, but they also know that from their experience that when they visit with me, I'm not going to try and hold something over them or get something from them. I'm just there to allow them an experience if they're willing to suspend the disbelief for a few minutes. That's all that matters, is that they build some memories.
Do you have any off-the-wall insane tax write-offs you get from being Santa Claus?
Well, before the insurance company said, no, you can't do that anymore, the first time I claimed them on my my tax form, $450 for candy canes. But insurance companies, since a lawsuit a couple years ago, have gotten real nervous about giving children anything that they might possibly choke on.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So Santa really can't give out candy canes anymore?
He can. There are certain ways that it can be done. In talking to the venues where I would normally do that, they've chosen other things to giveaways. I have several different giveaways that I have in place of that. And each year is kind of a little experiment as to what's good, what's better.
Does Santa Claus, if I am hiring Santa Al to come out and visit my home, there would be one moment, just for a moment, where I'd have to convince myself, okay, what if this is the real Santa? What if this is Santa's off season, right? And so even the adults have a moment where they can ask themselves, okay, I know this is silly to think about, and maybe, I'm just getting too much in my head, but what if this is Santa Claus who comes here?
I'm not really sure if adults think in those terms. I could be wrong.
We just don't want to admit it.
I think most adults, the ones that I have visited with, are of the mindset that they had an extraordinary experience as a child, and they want that for their children. So they search out possible situations. Why would you spend literally $10,000 to fly your family to Orlando or to California to have your child take a picture with a young lady in a costume of a 6-foot-tall rat? We all want to believe in magic. Magic is in our lives, whether we're willing to admit it or not. It just different forms. There's the magic of childhood, and there's the magic of marriage. There's the magic of television. You have a window in your living room or your family room that brings to you pictures that are pure fantasy. And unfortunately, the news. But where is it written that that is a bad experience? I know there are some parents that believe that telling their children the truth is the best way to go, that they won't be disappointed. But my question would be, who's more disappointed, the fact that you discovered that, or the fact that your child will never experience that magic? What's more important?
As the years roll by, so I happen to have gone to high school with your daughter.
Yes.
And what's it like for your daughter and your grandchildren to have Santa Claus as a dad and a grandpa?
Well, my hope is that all of my family is proud of what I've done and continue to do. There were a few years that whenever I would put on the suit, that one particular member of our family would get overly embarrassed by it. And they've since gotten past that, grown up, and that's great. I had an experience a few years ago with our grandchildren that our son was getting married a few years ago, his first marriage, and our daughter, along with her family, came home. The grandchildren were in the wedding, and they were at our home, and I was dressed. This was at Christmas time, so I had gotten dressed up to do a visit. And I'm going out the door in the suit, and granddaughter goes, "Grandpa, why are you dressed like Santa?" Our granddaughter is very pragmatic. She's 8 going on 18, or maybe it's 28. I don't know. Anyway, why are you dressed like Santa? And I turned and I said, well, and I knew this was going to come someday, so I prepared for it mentally. Because I work for him. Santa is a really busy guy this time of the year, and he can't be everywhere. And some people want to know that their wishes are met for Christmas. And everything that I hear, everything that I see, he sees and hears. And he knows everything as far as what children want, and I just help that. And she was okay with it. Okay, fine, no big deal. And then her mother asked, "Does Grandpa look like Santa?" Didn't miss a beat, not even a hesitation. Nah, he looks like Santa, or like Grandpa. So, and now I have another grandchild, a grandson, who I look forward to doing that. And same experience, and we have several pictures of our grandchildren in Christmas suits and that, and they're always going to know that I'm not the real Santa, but I'm not going to dispel the idea that there isn't a real Santa. They're fairly well steeped in that belief, and I'm going to continue that.
What do you get? What's it like when a kid tells Santa what they want? I think, we talked about the mall version of the Santa experience,
Yes.
right? Which is plop the kid down on the lap, they tell Santa what they want for Christmas, photo,
Picture.
and it's gone.
Yep.
Are your experiences, do they include those things, or are they writing a letter to Santa? It doesn't sound to me like your Santa is necessarily gift-based. It's more getting to enjoy the magic and getting to have that one-on-one experience.
Well, history and social norms have dictated that when you visit Santa, you're going to receive something, whether it's a piece of candy or whatever. You go with the hopes of sharing your dreams for gifts that you either might get or you wish for others. My experiences have encompassed just about all of that. I've delivered gifts. Just about all of the home visits I do, especially close to Christmas, I deliver gifts. And sometimes they're big parties, so I deliver a lot of them. And there are letters, there are coloring pages that we have that the children give us after they've decorated them. We've received a number of gifts from children when we're doing visits, for example, at Santa Village in Grand Forks. We've done some events with some local retail establishments where they've set up cookie decorating stations, coloring stations, letter writing stations, and we've received all of those. And they're all incredibly precious. The letters are just such a treat to read through. It's possibly the best thing that you can read through.
JJ, before you got to the studio today, Al and I were comparing Santa notes, which I'm actually kind of surprised you haven't shamed me with the fact yet that I was actually fired from being Santa once at the Morehead Center Mall, which I always have to quickly follow up with because I was too young. Every time JJ brings it up. But when Al and I were talking about that, I still have all my letters that kids gave to me, the 2 sessions that I was Santa Claus. And while that was a humiliating experience, and I was clearly not the right person to play Santa because I was only 18, those letters are incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. And the kids, I could even see in the kids' faces when they showed up, and they're like, "Oh, this is the Santa we're getting? Okay, fine." It's a kid with a plastic beard on, but they were so just ready to have a Santa experience that they didn't really care. And their letters were phenomenal. There was also a boy with severe cerebral palsy. He wasn't verbal. They brought him in a wheelchair, and then his mom and dad picked him up and put him on my lap, and we just sat for a couple of minutes, just not really talking, and transformative. transformative. And if I could get that out of 2 tiny sessions of being a really bad Santa at 18, I got to imagine what it feels like to be a regular Santa who does it every year, all December long, who doesn't have a crappy plastic beard, who is age appropriate, for that. That must be both a gift in the moment, and then must be terribly depressing when it's not that month and you're not getting that sort of connection with people.
We have incredibly wonderful visits every year. There is just this plateau of as Santa that it is difficult to overcome. You just don't get much better than that. There are rock stars, there are sports stars that all have their moments to shine, and I take nothing away from that other than the fact that for a brief time each season I get to share that type of love and attention. I have 2 visits that are older that stand out in my mind that I have retold. And I do tell stories quite a bit, unfortunately for some people too much. But besides the typical home visits for families, children, and their parents, I've also done a number of grown-up events where they don't necessarily want to hear my Christmas stories. They want to hear about my experiences as Santa. And as I was saying, there's 2 that stick out really well, and one is a great example of karma, and the other one is incredibly heartbreaking. The heartbreaking one was a young lady who was emotionally challenged. She came to me, this was several years ago, a beautiful girl, and she didn't sit on my knee, which is fine. When she started, you could tell she was nervous, and she wanted to talk, but she wasn't quite sure how to go about it. So I stood up and I asked her, I said, is it okay if I give you a hug? And she goes, yeah. And she goes, I love you, Santa. And I said, well, Santa loves you too. And I says, is there a wish you have for Christmas? Is there something you would like? And she thought for a few minutes, and she goes, I need a new brain. A really unusual request, to say the least. And of course, I asked her, why would you say that? Well, my mother says I have a rotten brain, and I need something new, so a new one, so that I can be like other kids. It just breaks your heart that a parent could possibly say something like that. And my only response, and I can only credit the suit for this because it's not in me normally. I said, no, do you believe in God? She goes, yeah. I says, and do you know that God doesn't make mistakes? Yeah. I says, God made you this way for a reason. Whether it's so that you can show love or people can love you more or whatever. He has a plan for you. And she was better as a result, and so was I. And when I sat down, Mrs. says to me, where did that come from? Mm-hmm. Because she doesn't know me as being the type of person that speaks about religion a lot. And I says, I don't know where it came from. It just at that moment it hit. And it will always be with me.
It's the
karma.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the type of story where, how could it ever leave you?
Yeah.
And so powerful.
I was my wife and I were the Santa at Santa Village here in Fargo for several years. I was the last Santa at Island Park, and we were the first Santa and Mrs. Claus at Row Farm for a few years. And one of the visits we had, now bear in mind at the time, I was also working full-time at the establishment which got me started as Santa. And this family came in, and cute little boy, impeccably dressed in a suit and a small trench coat, and he couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. Really struck me as being very, very upscale. And he had all of these pictures from toy catalogs that we used to have in those days, and circled ones that he wanted. And we had a great visit and talked, and his mother stood right there and kind of prompted him when he needed it or asked questions. And Dad was on the other side of the room, back in the corner. It's like he was pretending that he wasn't there. And like I said, great visit with the little guy, and we're talking, and I recognized the dad as being one of the powerful people in the organization I worked for. And I said to the son, I says, those are all great. I says, you'd like all of those, right? He goes, oh, yeah. And which ones would be the best ones you could possibly get? And then he pointed out 2 or 3 items. And I says, well, we'll see. I says, if you continue to be good, we'll do our best to get you what you dream for. I said, but what about Mom? What would she like for Christmas? What do you think would be good for her for Christmas? Well, he wasn't sure. Now, this guy, his father that was in the room, was known for having 2 vehicles, a fairly new Mercedes and a fairly new Hummer, I think they're called.
Sure.
Both of them diesels in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this was 20 years ago or so when
Oofta.
the diesels weren't as great for family vehicles as they are now. And he'd had a considerable amount of trouble with the Hummer. And at the time, the only place you could get it serviced was Minneapolis, St. Paul. He'd been without this vehicle for about a month. And it was pretty common knowledge he wasn't happy about it. We get to Dad. I said, so what do you think Dad would like for Christmas? Oh, wait a minute. I forgot. Dad got his truck back last week. He should be all set for Christmas. Dad's head snapped, staring at me like, what? And you could, his mouth hits the floor, his eyes bug out, and he mouths like, who are you? And I just said, just Santa.
That is amazing.
And like I say, this guy of power he exerted it quite a bit to a lot of people's dismay and discomfort. Later on, he was one of those guys that really liked to spend money on extravagant items. And I also was at a convenience store one day when he went through 5 credit cards to try and charge a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread before one finally got accepted. Turns out later, he went to a convention, came back, and wife had cleaned out what was left of the money, the house and the son, and took off. Instant karma.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like, hey, that's what happens when you're like that.
Well, Santa,
keeps you really humble.
He sees you when you're sleeping, and he knows when you're awake, right?
Kind of frightening, isn't it?
It is.
And he will tell your wife everything he sees.
Al, as we wrap up this conversation, which has been just fantastic, I feel like I've had a chance to chat with Santa Claus this whole time.
Well, I'm glad.
Are there pieces in pop culture and media that you really like, that, the Santa moments that we've kind of come to appreciate as a culture that you really think have done a good job?
Pop culture, the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies, first 2, were extraordinarily good in that respect. My favorite is the Richard Attenborough version of the Miracle on 34th Street. That scene where he signs with the little girl. Now, I am not fluent, but because of that particular movie, I have learned some basic sign language. And along with everything else, it's just one more piece that I want to become more complete. The other things that I find are great as far as pop culture, and that's that people's willingness to accept me as being their representative for Christmas.
That's very cool. That's awesome. If people want to follow what you're doing, I know that you've got a Facebook page that's dedicated to this. And can anyone just follow that?
Yes. Santa Al Jastram, Jastram. And I'm easy to find. I'm the only Santa Al that you'll find in the region. And there's a lot of pictures. And during the actual season, I post where I'm going to be in the area that are open to the public. And if somebody wants me to come to their home or to their event, they can contact me through that.
It's also important to note that you use the we statement a lot during this interview. And while you're a wonderful Santa Claus, it is not just you doing all of these events. Your amazing wife is your real life Mrs. Claus, as well as your stand-in Mrs. Claus. You have an amazing partner who fills the role of an elf that people don't traditionally see, but I think is, you guys have such great chemistry between the two of you. It's just perfect.
Well, I'm incredibly lucky in that I have a wife and a business partner that both not only accept but follow my lead when we do things, but also rein me in when I tend to go a little bit far. My partner, Jim Hagel, is so great in the fact that he is not only a creative person, he's incredibly good with being able to manufacture things, being able to craft things, being able to see the pragmatic side of my wild ideas. And through the years, when we have performed comedy magic shows, we script them all out like any show should be. And we know these scripts incredibly well because of rehearsals and that type of thing. We practice them to the point of knowing them in our sleep. But every once in a while, we'll find something in a show that just strikes us, and me more than him. But he said, wait a minute, that's really interesting. And I'll go off on that tangent during the show without any warning, unfortunately for Jim. And he's somewhat of a saint for putting up with that. But he'll just look at me and he'll kind of think to himself, okay, where are we going now? And like I say, when we're putting these shows together, he's really good at figuring out how to get it done. I will dream it up and say, what if we made a unicorn appear in the entire show and the children will be able to write, okay, how are we going to do that? is his response. And he's really good at figuring it out. We did a stage illusion that was very popular that finished our show every year. And we don't do stage illusions. We're not that type of show. This particular one allowed us to put together, and he assembled this. He built this from scratch. 2 folding chairs. Place a board over the folding chairs and a drop cloth. Have a young person come up and lay down on this board. Pull the chairs out from underneath. And the child hits the floor. No. And the child is there. And then take the board out from underneath them. It's a great illusion. And he built this from scratch. Just one thing of how incredibly talented he is.
Well, even Santa needs a good wingman.
Oh, yeah.
Al Jastram, it's been a real pleasure having you in the JJ Meets World studios today. It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to hearing more tales from Santa.
How many more days do you have? I have lots of stories.
Well, this is fantastic, and I'm sure someone will be in touch with you soon saying, I heard you on this podcast, and what I would like is Santa to show up on Memorial Day.
Wouldn't be the first time.
I can believe that. Al, thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope I didn't bore any of your listeners out there. Sometimes, as I've been reminded by family members, I tend to get on a little bit with the wind.
Can we end this with Santa's traditional greeting or sign off, however you want to do that? I don't know if you're a ho, ho, ho kind of a guy.
My ho, ho, ho is more of a kind of a laugh instead of the bellowing. But I do home visits and some of my other visits as well. If this situation is right, I will do what I call call outs. When I say Merry, you say Christmas. Okay? Merry?
Christmas.
Merry?
Christmas.
Come on. Merry?
Christmas.
Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews, and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. If I ever came downstairs and I saw that my mom was kissing Santa Claus, I think that would be grounds for divorce.